Eccellenza Reverendissima, dear guests, good afternoon, and thanks for being here today. I'm pleased to welcome you to Palazzo Borromeo, together with my wife Claudia and the staff of the Italian Embassy to the Holy See. Let me thank Professor Ernesto Caffo, President of Telefono Azzurro and Foundation Child, for organizing this event with us on the occasion of the International Day for the Protection of Children Against Sexual Abuse and Exploitation. We have established a long-standing and absolutely fruitful cooperation based on common priority attributed to the rights of children and adolescents. Earlier this morning, the Embassy had the pleasure to host here an event on the rehabilitation and social integration of children and adolescents held in youth detention centers. Even though on a different perspective, the importance of protecting and caring for the most fragile and vulnerable people has emerged in all its urgency. I look forward to hearing the contribution of our honorable speakers who will intervene on abuses in a changing and increasingly challenging environment, highly affected by technological development. We should not fear technological development, but take it into account is of the utmost importance. Thank you very much for your attention, and I leave the floor to Professor Caffo.
I'd like to thank Ambassador Dinitto to host us another time in this wonderful location. Thank to his wife that is absolutely supportive of this very important moment in which we speak about children's rights. And the embassy became a point of reference for all of us to discuss a very complicated topic. Today we speak about children victims of sexual abuse. Is the day in which we remember the Convention of Lanzarote. Is the day in which we remember the International Day for Child Sexual Abuse, decided by the United Nations 2 years ago. Today we will speak a lot about different kinds of abuse. Sexual abuse in the field, in different parts of the world, and we speak too about the digital exploitation of children. This is another important issue that we face in the past is place. Speak about child dignity in the digital world with the words of the Holy Father that support in this process all of us, because we know the risk that children live now in a world in which we have a new challenge risk. For example, artificial intelligence is one issue that we have to face. Today we will have many speakers, and but before we have to ask to one colleague, that is Fabiolucci, that is the Vice Dean of the University of Rome, La Sapienza, to speak and to make his message, because he had to run for a very complicated situation that happened for a student of La Sapienza in Rome. And with La Sapienza, we are working now together with the Gregorian too for a conference that we organize internationally with Camp Center, IBSCAN, and Telefono Azzurro to speak about child abuse. It will be in June. We will be here, hosted for an evening by the embassy. But it will be a very important moment which will decide the future of children's rights, in this case, in the academic field. Fabio.
So thank you very much, Ernesto, for organizing this event. Thank you for guesting this event. I'm very sorry because I will be obliged to move very fastly because a student has had an incident. She died, and a community in this kind of situation, you know, you're an expert of trauma, has to be close. And so I will be there in few minutes. But I'm very happy to give the greetings of Antonella Polimeni. She's the rector of our university, and to have the opportunity to thank Ernesto for all his work together with you and together with a lot of institutions that are committed with this kind of issues. You know, I'm part of a university. I see some friends from my own university here, and we have committed with the research, even when we talk about treatment. For instance, we know something about the evidence about the existing therapeutics intervention. We know something about the various approaches to therapies and modalities practiced by professionals with child and adolescents that have been involved in sexual abuse. There are a lot of treatment outcomes that we know. There are some evidence, and there are different therapeutic intervention documented as being practiced within the population of involved in this kind of trauma. There are a number of individual studies. There are systematic reuse and meta-analysis that can be easily identified. Recognize that we are in front of a lot of inconclusive, conflicting, and contradictory evidence. Based on these findings, we know that we need a lot of activities. We need to debate. We need to go ahead with research if we want to go ahead with some more conclusive results. So a moment as this one is very important, not only to celebrate the idea to work together, but also to recognize the amount of work that still is needed to practice a correct, evidence-based idea of intervention. This is the reason why Sapienza University has accepted with a lot of enthusiasm the idea to have a work conference in which we will have the opportunity to exchange best practices and ideas. And this is the reason why it's particularly important to have moments such as this one at an international level, not only at a national one, because the approaches are real different, the system are real organized in a very different way, and we have to recognize the idea to exchange practice. This is the very simple message that I would like to bring from my university, together with my gratitude for the effort that you are carrying on this very important issue. Thank you, Ernesto. Thank you, everyone. And I'm very sorry I have to leave you for the reason I told you. Thank you.
Oh, good evening. Okay. My name is Joshua McElwee. I'm the Vatican correspondent for the Reuters news agency. I've been asked to help moderate tonight. It's an honor to be with you all for this event, Giving Voice to Silence. We've heard already from two of our speakers. We're going to have several more this evening. So we're going to try and let each speaker give their testimonies, their important witnesses, and then we'll also have some time at the end for conversation and sharing. Many of the speakers tonight will be joining us remotely, so we'll see them on the screen. Some are with us in real time. Others have sent video messages that will be played. And the first is coming from Ernie Allen, who is the president of the We Protect Global Alliance.
This World Day. Can you hear me? Let me try again.
Yes, we can hear you, Ernie.
Okay, great. Well, I'm honored to be a part of this, grateful for the opportunity. Let me say this is not a new challenge, and I want to express my thanks to Telefono Azzurro, particularly to Professor Caffo, to the Italian government, to the Holy See. 13 years ago, we worked together with Professor Caffo, Telefono Azzurro, the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children, whose chair, Sally Paul, is with us today, and the Holy See's Pediatric Hospital, Bambino Gesù, and the Mayo Clinic, on a conference to look at these very issues and the challenges that we faced and the progress that we needed to make. 6 years later, we organized another conference with Telefono Azzurro and Professor Caffo, Child Dignity in the Digital World, and that was at the Pontifical Gregorian University. And in 2019, a conference at the Pontifical Academies of Science. So there's a lot more to do. Fabio Lucidi just mentioned that in June, we will be convening a conference with a goal to create a global research agenda. So thanks again to La Sapienza, to Telefono Azzurro, Pontifical Gregorian University, and the Kemp Center. And Ernesto mentioned that ISPACAN, the International Society for the Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect, will be our scientific partner. Now, why is there a need for such a conference, and why is there a need to create a global research agenda? And that's because today's World Day and this event is aptly named Give Voice to Silence. Perhaps our greatest challenge is that child sexual abuse is largely a problem of hidden victims. Most victims don't tell. Most of the abuse is not reported to law enforcement, social services agencies, even parents and caregivers, particularly in this digital age. So assessing the true extent of the problem is not easy. And that's why epidemiological research is so vital. As Joshua mentioned, I'm honored to chair the policy board of the We Protect Global Alliance, which is an alliance of 103 countries, including Italy and every member of the European Union, 76 private companies, including the companies represented today, Snap, Microsoft, Meta, and many others, 121 civil society organizations, including Telefono Azzurro and InHope, and 10 international bodies, including the European Union, UNICEF, Interpol, Europol, and many others. Periodically, we issue a global threat assessment. It's a product of new research and broad consultation. And to provide some context for the comments I want to make to you today on the scope of the challenge we face, let me quote the New York Times in 2019, which said, 20 years ago, online images were a problem. 10 years ago, an epidemic. Now the crisis is at a breaking point. And they added, tech companies, the governments, and authorities are no match. I spent 28 years at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And during that time, we never handled as many as 1 million reports of child sexual abuse and exploitation in a single year. I stepped down in 2012. Last year, NCMEC handled 36 million reports worldwide. And that's just those that are reported. Denton Howard's organization, InHope, the global network of internet hotlines, of which Telefono Azzurro is a leading member, reported that 89% of its reports of child sexual abuse material involved children between the ages of 3 and 13. UNICEF tells us that 1 in 3 internet users is a child. With more than 5 billion people on the internet today, 61% of the world's population, that means that at least 1.5 billion children are online. And 92% of internet users use a mobile phone to go online at least some of the time. So our old advice of putting the PC in a public area where a child's use can be monitored and overseen is no longer terribly relevant. Social media continues to grow. With 4.7 billion users in 2022, 59% of all the people on Earth. And during the COVID pandemic, online sexual solicitation and grooming of children more than doubled. Our latest threat assessment cites new evidence. Let me cite a few examples. UNICEF, ECPAT, and Interpol conducted research called Disrupting Harm in 13 countries in Africa and Asia. It found that as many as 20% of the children were subjected to child sexual exploitation online in the past year. The Internet Watch Foundation in the UK reports a 360% increase in self-generated imagery of 7 to 10-year-olds from 2020 to 2022. The FBI issued a public safety alert about an explosion of financial sextortion schemes targeting children and teens. NCMEC's report of sextortion increased 7,200% in 2022. And one result of this new phenomenon is a dramatic increase in youth suicide. Artificial intelligence, as Ernesto mentioned, is now being used to create and distribute child sexual abuse material. Grooming of children on gaming platforms is growing. Research found that individuals seeking to abuse children can lock them into high-risk grooming conversations in as little as 19 seconds after first contact, with an average time of just 45 minutes. Younger children are being inundated with inappropriate content online. A UK study found that the average age of first exposure to internet pornography is 13 and declining. Studies in Indonesia and Taiwan found the age of first exposure to pornography has a significant relationship with risky sexual behaviors. There's a lot more I could mention, but we also addressed how best to respond. On this World Day, let me focus a minute on prevention. A recent World Vision study found that compared to prosecution, prevention of child sexual abuse is dramatically under-prioritized and underfunded. We've called for a public health-based approach. This doesn't mean less investment in law enforcement and prosecution. It simply means that the problem is far larger than our capacity to just arrest and prosecute offenders. We need to stop these offenses from happening in the first place. And we need to engage the children themselves. That includes ensuring that children have age-appropriate knowledge and that we remove barriers to identifying victims, including victim shaming. Finally, prevention is key, but so is regulation. Australia has called for global adoption of safety by design, building safety into the design of technology products and services. Other members of today's panel have been pioneers in that space. Some call this our seatbelt moment. A generation ago, governments began to mandate common sense safety protections into product design. Seat belts, child safety seats, bicycle helmets, food safety standards. Many industries were opposed, but the result was millions of lives saved and no damage to the business model. In fact, the regulations actually strengthened the products. We've made extraordinary progress through voluntary innovation, like Microsoft's PhotoDNA and other tools to identify and remove child sexual abuse material. But is voluntary good enough? If the response is only voluntary, there will be those who choose to do nothing. Thanks to the leadership of people like Caterina Canici, Emilio Puccio, and others, Europe has been at the forefront in grappling with this question. We're at the beginning of what I hope will be our seatbelt moment, a global movement to adopt approaches that don't stifle innovation or harm businesses at all, but keep children safe. Legislative responses need to be consistent, and common international standards must be pursued. Ernesto mentioned the importance of the Lanzarote Convention, and we hope that governments will be guided by the minimum standards in UNICEF's Legislating for the Digital Age report. There's a lot more, but let me conclude by saying that while we're proud of the progress, there is so much more to do. We must truly give voice to silence. There is a global crisis regarding the sexual abuse and exploitation of children, but it is not yet a priority on global policy agendas. We have to change that. Our leaders have a lot to worry about: wars, climate change, immigration, health crises, hunger, economic challenges, and a lot more. But the abuse and exploitation of the world's children should be at or near the top of that list. Your leadership and the impact of this World Day commemoration and the leadership of organizations like Telefono Azzurro can help us make this challenge a true global priority. Thank you for all you do. It's a great honor to be with you. There's more ahead.
Well, thank you, Dr. Allen, for that overview of the global challenges facing the struggle to protect children online, especially a very, very substantial overview. I think we turn now to someone who is in the room with us, sitting next to me. It's Bishop Luis Manuel Ali Herrera, who is the Secretary for the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors at the Vatican. He's been in the role, I think, 5 months here in Rome.
Yes.
So we can also welcome him to Rome.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues and distinguished guests, today we gather on the International Day for the Protection of Children Against Sexual Exploitation and Abuse, a day dedicated to raising awareness and promoting concrete actions to safeguard the rights and well-being of children and adolescents. This event, organized by the S.O.S. Telefono Azzurro Foundation, is a valuable step in our collective mission to protect the most vulnerable members of our society. I am grateful to Professor Ernesto Caffo, member of the Commission, for the invitations. The issues of child sexual exploitation and abuse is a global crisis that affects countless lives, often hidden from view, yet leaving enduring serves on the health and future of children and adolescents. It is a crisis that demands our immediate and unwavering attention. Every child has the right to grow up in a safe environment, free from the shadows of exploitation and abuse and it is our duty to ensure that their rights are upheld. The Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors aims to play its role in this global effort. Established by Pope Francis, the Commission works to develop and implement effective safeguarding initiatives across the world. It engages in dialogue with the dicasteries and the Roman Curia and is structured in different regions, including Europe, Africa, Asia, Oceania, and the Americas. This global approach aims to ensure that our efforts are comprehensive and culturally sensitive, addressing the unique challenges faced by children in different parts of the world. One of the key aspects of the Commission's work is its methodology for networking, which involves a synodal process with each of the church entities concerned. This helps in creating collaborative system for mapping and promoting safeguarding efforts across the universal church. This process includes engaging with international organizations and global local NGOs, as well as with victims and survivors to consult and analyze publicly available information, thereby enriching the know-how with diverse perspectives. This is crucial because, as I mentioned in my opening speech at the European Conference Safeguarding in the Catholic Church in Europe, we held here in Rome just a few days ago, it allows us to create a network of the good with capital G, which is antithetical to the web of sex abuse, nowadays so dangerously present in the online world as well. The Commission recognizes the waiting for victims and survivors to come forward is not enough. We have the responsibility to actively reach out and create safe spaces where they feel empowered to speak. This proactive approach is essential in developing resources that help victims heal and reclaim their lives. It is about building trust, offering support, and ensuring the justice is served. We must ask ourselves, how can we better serve those who have been wronged? What system can we put in place to prevent such abuses from happening in the first place? From legislative measures to community-based programs, every aspect of our response must be scrutinized and strengthened. The Commission, during a press conference, presented last month the first annual report, a tool for transparency and accountability, providing a clear audit of progress in safeguarding efforts. It documents where risks remain and where advances can be found in the church efforts to protect children and vulnerable adults. This report is not just a collection of data. It is an instrument of conversion, promoting a culture of safeguarding and offering a specific recommendation to further progress that has been possible to roll up thanks to the various important collaboration established by the Commission with the Episcopal conferences during the meeting here in Rome, with religious congregation, with the Roman Curia, and with Caritas Internationalis. Furthermore, our international perspective allows us to learn from best practices around the world. In Europe, we see strong legislative frameworks and community awareness campaigns that are successfully changing the landscape of child protection. In Africa, grassroots organizations are making significant strides in education and prevention. reaching remote areas with innovative situations. In Asia, partnerships between government and NGOs are creating new channels to reach vulnerable populations, ensuring no child is left behind. In the Americas, survivors-led initiatives reshaping our understanding of justice and healing, offering insights into the power of lived experience. And in Oceania, First Nations people approaches to child protection are offering valuable lessons in cultural competency and community-led safeguarding. As we examine these diverse approaches, we must also consider how they can be integrated in a cohesive global strategy. Collaboration and communications are key. We must break down barriers and work together, sharing knowledge and resources to create a world where every child is safe from harm. This requires a commitment from all sectors: government, civil societies, religious institutions, and the private sector. In addition to prevention and protection, we must also focus on accountability and justice. Perpetrators of abuse must be held accountable for their actions, and victims must have access to the legal support they need to seek justice. This requires robust legal systems, trained professionals, and a commitment of upholding the rights of children. We need to ensure that justice is not just a concept, but a reality for those who have been wronged. The role of civil society is also critical in this endeavor. Community organizations, advocacy groups, and survivors themselves play a vital role in raising awareness, providing support, and driving change. Their voices must be heard, and their contribution valued as we work towards a common goal. It is through their courage and resilience that we find inspiration and direction. Today, as we reflect on the progress we have made and the challenges that lie ahead, let us reaffirm our commitment to action. Each of us has a role to play, whether it is through advocacy, research, policy making, or direct support to children and families. Together, we can create a safer, brighter future for every child. Let us not be compliant. Let us push forward with determination and hope. In closing, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to all of you for your dedication and passion. Your presence here today is a testament to you and to our common commitment to protect our most precious resources, our children. Let's continue to work together, to listen, to learn, and to act cooperatively. Let us be the voices for those who cannot speak for themselves. Let us be authentic team players for a world where every child can grow up free from fear, exploitation, abuses, and full of hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Pereira, for that moving testimony and a window into the work of the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors. Our next speaker is going to be joining us again from video stream. It's Sally Paul, who is chair of the Board of Directors for the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
Joshua, thank you. I hope everyone can hear me. Okay. I'm so disappointed at not being able to join you in person for this important recognition and event this evening. but I am honored that I can share a few words on behalf of the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Let me just share that a vision, which I believe we all have, is that we know that we can create a world where children can grow up safe from the fear of exploitation, sexual abuse, or the risk of going missing. And this is where the International Center focuses its efforts across 3 core pillars of learning, of advocacy, and of technology. And I'd like to share maybe just a couple of thoughts on each of these and where we are hoping to create impact and influence to help prevent exploitation and online abuse, as well as to give law enforcement, judiciary, and prosecutors the means and the capability to find and prosecute those perpetrators of these heinous acts against children. I really appreciated when Ernie kicked off the discussion for this panel that we are indeed in the midst of a global pandemic, one where these criminals are perpetrating emotional, mental, and physical suffering and trauma on children that creates a generational ripple effect that until we are able to more fulsomely address the scourge of these individuals, these criminals, only helps to create a drag on our society and on our humanity. So where is ICMEC most deliberately engaged? On the learning front, we have a unique mechanism of working with countries and institutions at this point across every continent on our planet to help governments understand their own ability to detect, to fight, and to prevent child exploitation and sexual abuse. And from these assessments, we are able to help give training so that they are better able to coordinate both within their countries and with groups outside of their countries to better protect children. On the advocacy front, we are deeply engaged in, I believe, I'm not sure if it was Ernie or perhaps the next speaker, talking about device level protection. This is critically important because we know that so much of this activity is taking place on devices that children have that maybe their parents aren't even aware what their level of access is. Device protection prevents the upload or the download of harmful images and helps to protect the child. And in the world of technology, as we look at our unique missing children's engine, this case management tool, we know that children who have gone missing are particularly vulnerable to exploitation and worse. And with our upgraded technology that we are nearing the point of beta testing with law enforcement in countries around the world, we hope to take the 5,000+ children that this tool has helped to find and safely return home, that we can make this case management tool something that is better deployed by law enforcement and governments around the world. I would like to say that where we have invested significant energy is in our ability to create customized training that doesn't just focus on law enforcement, but ensures that judiciary and prosecutors are equally well-versed in a number of different areas of what it takes to first identify that the crimes are happening, understand how to create cyber units that are better able to detect online exploitation and abuse, and ultimately to ensure that police or law enforcement have the mechanism to actually capture and then prosecute the criminals. Since its inception, we have trained today more than 16,000 law enforcement, judiciary, and educators in schools on a suite of programs better able to detect and prevent child exploitation. We also, most recently, have been able to expand our reach into a total of 128 countries around the world. But we can't do this work without the partnership that is represented in this room this evening and the partnership of governments and institutions around the world. No single organization has the capability to go up against the sophistication of criminals that are abusing children. But collectively, we can do this. The last note that I will leave you with is we have not talked yet this evening about how we mobilize society, how we help ordinary citizens to be as outraged as we are at these crimes, and also to take a proactive stance in helping to prevent the crimes from occurring at the outset. We believe we have the means and the capability to do this, but it takes all of us together. The last note then that I leave you with is that the International Center, through its focus across these core pillars of child protection, the training, the advocacy, and the technology, our reach across all regions of the world and more than 120 countries, our commitment is unending, it is deep, and we hope for ongoing partnership with each of you. Professor Kaufo, again, thank you so very much for the invitation to join this evening to share just a couple of comments. I'm truly honored. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Paul, for those remarks and for, again, sharing such a interesting overview of the problems facing, the dangers facing children online. We're next joined also in video link by Anna Maria Corazza-Bildt, who is also a member of the board of the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children and a former member of the EU Parliament.
Dear friends, hello from New Delhi. Always great to be with you and to listen to the words of wisdom of one of children's best friends in the world, Ernie Allen. I can only applaud and subscribe. And I also warmly applaud the commitment of hotlines and helplines like Telefono Azzurro, and one of the strongest advocates of children's rights of our times. Thank you, Ernesto Caffo. Illegal material should be removed. Basta. The toolbox to fast identify, report, and remove CSSM should be developed. We need to upgrade legislation combined with boosting tech innovation. And this should be based on the principles of net neutrality, future-proof, respect for the dignity of children as child holders, as well as safety by design. Never get tired to repeat these principles. EU policy making and debate has been for much too long and much too much dominated by not only legitimate concerns for privacy, but also privacy ideology and rich lobbies. Children privacy is not less important than adult privacy. And we are talking about crimes, hybrid crimes, law enforcement. It is not because you don't see the blood and the tears that kids are not suffering. And the magnitude of those crimes is not yet fully grasped by public and policy. We have a responsibility to give a voice to those who are not heard and those who have been through those terrible traumas. Break the silence. And I want to take this opportunity to say how important it is to respect survivors, to listen to survivors, and to involve them in policy making. We live in the world of Elon Musk, the oligarch now appointed to remove any legal framework to Silicon Valley. And we have to react by promoting even more good legislation to protect children online. And I'm proud that the European Union has been at the forefront of setting standards for digital services, consumer protection, and artificial intelligence. This can also be used for globally, of course, by adjusting to the different local realities of other parts of the world. When I was an MEP, we adopted the first directive on combating and preventing child sexual abuse and exploitation in 2011. That was followed up by my re-implementation report that stepped up the issues. And then on this basis, the Commission proposal by Commissioner Johansson 4 years ago of a regulation to remove illegal material. That has been, unfortunately, much delayed and much hijacked. I really want here to commend and support my dear friends Caterina Chinnici and Emilio Puccio, who are really standing up in the European Parliament to make sure that we can finalize this controversial legislation that has been watered down. And really time has come to bridge the antagonism between privacy and other rights for children online. There are two good examples. The Safety Online Code, recently adopted in the UK, I have to say, much to the credit of the Fire Rights Foundation, when I'm proud to sit in the board, and the Global Digital Compact, adopted by the United Nations this September at the General Assembly, facilitated also by Sweden. And it is fairly obvious that global crises like sexual abuse and exploitation of children require global solution. People across the world, countries, cultures, faith, religions must get together and mobilize. And the net giants should do more and take into task. And how do we do that? We need not with confrontation, well, with dialogue, but dialogue with teeth. And there are two ways forward to be effective. One, regulating social media. Two, stepping up our cooperation. Let's face it, NGO cannot do it alone. Constantly struggling for funding and advocacy. Let's be honest, funding is an issue. NGOs spend a lot of time doing fundraising and paperwork. And often funding is short-term, conditional, and uncertain. And the dependency from tech giants for funding is increasing. So joining forces has become an imperative among civil society, between private and public, with partnership, with many of the businesses that are really committed to develop tech solutions to protect kids. Social media need to be regulated with age verification tools. It must be introduced from TikTok onwards. There is ample scientific documentation that social media create dependency, lack of concentration, lack of sleep, mental health problem, cyberbullying, sex and sex extortion, and grooming, leading to self-harm, sexual abuse and exploitation, and even suicide. And banning phone at school has become necessary. Banning social media is not, in my view, the good way forward, except for very small kids. But restriction on the use of phone and learning through reading and writing has to be reintroduced. There's a good example of Australia now banning social media under 16-year-old. It might be exaggerated in my view, but it shows that things are moving in the right direction. Commissioner President von der Leyen said in her speech to Parliament in July that she will launch a review, an impact assessment on social media. It's about time. And I facilitated in Rome last week an event hosted by Fondazione S.O.S with also Ernesto Caffo and Telefono Azzurro, with the Italian and the Swedish Ministers of Education, basically agreeing that we have to go from screen to books, reintroducing in schools papers and pen. And I'm very proud to serve in the board of ICMEC. So ICMEC is going to a real restructure and adjust, and the net giants should do more and take into task. And how do we do that? We need not with confrontation, well, with dialogue, but dialogue with teeth. And there are two ways forward to be effective. One, regulating social media. Two, stepping up our cooperation. Let's face it, NGO cannot do it alone. Constantly struggling for funding and advocacy. Let's be honest, funding is an issue. NGOs spend a lot of time doing fundraising and paperwork. And often funding is short-term, conditional, and uncertain. And the dependency from tech giants for funding is increasing. So joining forces has become an imperative among civil society, between private and public, with partnership, with many of the businesses that are really committed to develop tech solutions to protect kids. Social media need to be regulated with age verification tools. It must be introduced from TikTok onwards. There is ample scientific documentation that social media create dependency, lack of concentration, lack of sleep, mental health problem, cyberbullying, sex extortion, and grooming, leading to self-harm, sexual abuse and exploitation, and even suicide. And banning phone at school has become necessary. Banning social media is not, in my view, the good way forward, except for very small kids. But restriction on the use of phone and learning through reading and writing has to be reintroduced. There's a good example of Australia now banning social media under 16-year-old. It might be exaggerated in my view, but it shows that things are moving in the right direction. Commissioner President von der Leyen said in her speech to Parliament in July that she will launch a review, an impact assessment on social media. It's about time. And I facilitated in Rome last week an event hosted by Fondazione Audi with also Ernesto Caffo, Telefono Azzurro, with the Italian and the Swedish Ministers of Education, basically agreeing that we have to go from screen to books, reintroducing in schools papers and pen. And I'm very proud to serve in the board of ICMEC. So ICMEC is going to a real restructuring and adjustment to the challenges that I'm talking about. Bringing tech into ICMEC, embedding tech knowledge and capability, and reaching out for partnership, which I am.
Seems we had a bit of technical difficulties there. Dr. Corazza-Bildt was repeating. So I'm not sure if we're able to join her again or if we should move on. I think it was finished. Okay, I think we're finished. But thank you, Dr. Corazza-Bildt, for kind of raising the conversation also to what is happening at the EU level. We were hoped to be joined today also by Katerina Kinishi, who is an EU Parliament member and the chairwoman or the co-chairwoman of the European Parliament Intergroup on Children's Rights. She's not able to be with us, but sitting next to me today is Emilio Puccio, who is the Secretary General of that intergroup and is here to join us and offer his reflections.
Thank you, Joshua. Thank you, President Caffo, for inviting me. Thanks His Excellency the Ambassador for hosting us in such a beautiful venue. It's always a pleasure to be back. Wow, a lot has been said already. It's very cool for me to now come back after Mrs. Corazza-Bildt and unfortunately Mrs. Caterina Kinishi, Honorable Member Kinishi, couldn't come today because she was sick this morning, so she wasn't able to join. She sent her regards. Actually, very interesting enough, Mrs. Corazza-Bildt, together with Honorable Member Caterina Kinishi, founded together the Intergroup back in 2014. So we're talking already about 2 parliamentary terms ago. The Intergroup is a very fascinating platform because it gathers around 125 members of the European Parliament out of 720 representatives of all the 27 European Union member states. It has been incredible honor for me to be the Secretary General because thanks to the work of the Intergroup, a lot has been done in many of the pieces of legislation that are now discussed at the European Union level. And without further ado, I'd like to kind of dive a bit deeper into this piece of legislation, if Joshua allows me and keep me on time. So today is the International Day Against Sexual Abuse and Exploitation of Children. It is a day that is actually also, well, initially was a date connected to the Council of Europe and the Lanzarote Convention, but now it's also an international day celebrated as well under the auspices of the United Nations. I would say, with a kind of a hint of pride, that the European Union has been absolutely at the forefront in this battle to address those very, very dire challenges. We heard by Ernie Allen about the absolutely increase, very terrible increase in numbers of reports. Ernie was talking about 36 million reports received by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And I want to add to that picture that in one report, there can be actually even 100 pictures included. So the number, if we take into consideration the actual number of images, is much more than 36 million. So basically, how did we come about in the European Union to come forward with these very important pieces of legislation that, once again, they put the European Union in absolute leadership in the world? So back in 2020, Commissioner Ylva Johansson published a strategy for a better and more effective fight against child sexual abuse. And again, if you ask me, I think actually the most important, the most powerful weapon we have at hand to kind of address this very, very dramatic scourge of child sexual abuse is in fact legislation. We need stronger regulations. We heard from Anna Maria Corazza-Bildt. And so the European Union has very much, the legislator has taken this very seriously, and it came up with one piece of legislation, which is the regulation to prevent and combat child sexual abuse, which is still unfortunately under discussion in the European Council, which gathers the 27 European Union member states. But it also went farther, and now we are debating a new, another piece of legislation, which is the Directive 93/2011 to combat child sexual abuse and child sexual exploitation. And you might see that the name is very similar, but they actually try to address two different, very different issues, in fact. So on the one hand, through the regulation, the European Union has come up with a very important set of regulations, specific rules, that are addressed to all online social media services, so all online communication services providers. So this is a legal instrument, that's why it's a regulation, on the European Union's one single market. I can't stress enough how important it is that the European Union came together and put forward such an important piece of legislation, because when we talk about one single market, we are talking about 450 million people. The European Union, the 27 European Union member states combined population is a very, very, again, 450 million. And in fact, this united single market provides for one of the most, the biggest actually market share of Meta and other social media platforms, and we will hear from them later. So basically, what is actually that is in common among all of these pieces of legislation? We also, on the other hand as well, so this is a very specific choice of the legislator to come up with a legislation that is addressing specifically the child sexual abuse. But it is also another, so the commitment to the European Union goes even further. So last year in the European Parliament was approved the Digital Services Act, which for the first time ever puts the fundamental rights at the center. The whole architecture of all these pieces of legislation, albeit numerous and various, is the same. So basically, it's, as has been said as well by Anna Maria Corazza-Bildt, it is not about bashing the company. It is not about preventing children from going online, but it's about regulating an environment where kids, 1 out of 3 users worldwide, is a child. So this requires for a specific approach. And so when we talk about this architecture, what is actually the revolutionary character of all these pieces of legislation is that for the first time ever, all the companies that want to operate in the European Union single market, they have to perform a risk assessment as to whether each of their services and products that they offer online present a systemic risk for child sexual abuse and child sexual exploitation. And so once, and unfortunately, mostly all of the services online that allow users, without even knowing each other, to be in contact, present such a risk. Because we know that unfortunately perpetrators are getting smarter and smarter and smarter in order to actually recruit new victims. So basically, once this risk assessment is performed, and once the company actually identified what are those risks, the legislature goes even further and obliges this company to put in place some mitigating measures. When we talk about mitigating measures, we are talking about, for instance, age verification tools or parental control tools. And even if, unfortunately, those measures, once they are implemented, they also fail to protect children, and their services and products are still, unfortunately, misused for child sexual abuse, The law goes even further, is into obliging this company to detect this sexual abuse material and report it to the authorities to then remove it. So once again, this is actually absolutely revolutionary, because up to this day, all these reports that also Ernie Allen was referring to, they're actually done on a voluntary basis by these companies. And as we said this morning, actually, I think it was Senator Beatrice Lorenzini who said that, we can leave this up to the company. It's not about, again, once again, bashing the company, but it couldn't be left up to the voluntary basis. It cannot be a voluntary basis whether these companies want to introduce or not such technological instruments to detect child sexual abuse material. It's actually up to the legislator to define the legal framework within which these companies have to operate. And again, what I think is actually unfortunately striking is that it is hard to understand that those very, when we talk about child sexual abuse, and that's why I mentioned in my very brief introduction at the beginning that there are not only the regulation, which is a legal instrument on the internal market, but the European Union has also gone further with the directive. So once we talk about child sexual abuse material, we talk about a crime per se. The mere possession of child sexual abuse material is a crime per se. And so is the distribution, so is the production, and is the possession again. So basically, unfortunately, it's also a very sad reality on how once the child sexual abuse material is produced, and if we let this up and running on the social media services, we are condemning the person, the victim depicted in this very image, for a vicious cycle of re-victimization at basically this person who is depicted in this abuse, which happened a certain moment in time, will be forced to actually suffer and be re-victimized at every single new view of this own material. So once again, what is actually the approach that has been taken here is that the companies which are benefiting from these services and from child users, they need to ensure to embed safety by design rules. They need to embed these rules to ensure that their impact is actually reduced, the negative impact on children, and they're not longer used for misuse, in this case, for being a facilitator, an accelerator for child sexual abuse material. Again, you might ask, and I'm gonna go with my conclusion. Of course, the legislation alone, per se, is not the only answer, and it cannot just be, unfortunately, it's not a silver bullet, in fact. So, and that's really why I always appreciate the gatherings of Professor Caffo, because they put together a lot of, I think, of the actors reflecting this, the need for a multi-stakeholder and multidisciplinary approach when it comes to bring about a real change in this ecosystem. But again, I very much appreciate, and I very much want to, again, with a hint of pride, to commend the amazing work done by the European Union in leading the way, because if we manage to pass this piece of legislation, the regulation, the European Union will convert into the first ever jurisdiction that is obliging company. And I just want to emphasize one last bit to say that for the first time ever, we're also observing, if we manage to pass this legislation, what we call a shift of the burden of the proof. So once we put in place this legislation, it's no longer up to the victim themselves to report, which can also be very challenging. Let's be honest, it can be challenging. We will hear later by Gemma, it's very challenging to report this kind of abuse. So basically, for the very first time ever, the burden of the proof will no longer be on the victim themselves, but it's going to be, in fact, shifted on the company, which if they fail to fulfill the duty of care, they will be actually also can be dragged to court. And so it's a revolutionary change of approach, and I very much hope that this is going to be passed soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emilio. Thank you for especially speaking about EU regulation and trying to remove material that is offensive or is causing harm to people. That fits in with who we are joined by next, who is Denton Howard, who is the Executive Director of InHope, an umbrella network of some 54 internet hotlines in 50 countries dedicated to removing child sexual abuse material from the internet.
Good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you're sitting. So can I just check that I'm going to use a PowerPoint as a visual aid? Ernie, I'm looking at you. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see my presentation? Perfect. Okay. I would like to thank Emilio for taking many of my presentation points, which I've just edited out. So I've shortened my presentation rather than tell you things that he's already mentioned, because he's going to talk about, he talked quite a bit about the legislation that I was going to talk about. So I won't bore you, and I've edited my presentation already to make sure that that's gone. So firstly, I would like to introduce myself for the youths that don't know me. My name is Denton Howard. I'm the Executive Director of InHope. Been nearly in InHope 20 years. Ernie, you've got longer than me. I got to give you that. I've the Executive Director since 2018. I kind of generally recognized as a subject matter on CSAM and lots of other things. And I included this image because that was kind of the last time I was in Rome, and we got to meet His Holiness that day. It was a rather amazing day, I have to say. That brings memories of what happened. And I see a few people smiling who were there that day. So first of all, I wanted to talk to you briefly about why we're here today. But before I do that, I just want to thank Professor Caffo and Telefono Azzurro and the Italian Embassy to the Holy See for letting me speak with you today. Because again, as was mentioned by two of the previous speakers, we are marking a very important day, the World Day for the Prevention of and Healing from Child Sexual Exploitation. And I'm going to hijack some of the text. It says we are here basically to give voice to the silence, and I'm going to come to that point in a second because it's really important. But what I'm going to talk to you about is a number of headings. But I'd like you to sort of write down two words if you have a piece of paper in front of you. I'd like you to write the word prevention, and I'd like you to write the word practical, because that's where I'm coming from in this rather than the theoretical. So I'm going to focus on prevention first of all, because we simply put, we need to focus on preventing things from happening ideally. So like the fire services in every country, they want you to prevent a fire rather than come and trying to put one out and deal with the damage that occurs from it. So it's quite important that we sort of keep that in the back of our minds when we're talking about things. But in general, I'm going to talk to you about four main headings in the next 6 to 7 minutes, okay? First of all is something which was referenced earlier in regard to ICMIC, which is the importance of vision. Then I'm going to talk about, again, prevention. I'm going to talk to you about what InHope is doing about it, and I'm going to briefly talk about legislation. But whatever we have, just remember, there's no such thing as a silver bullet, okay? This is a war. It's not a battle. It's going to be, in other words, dealt with by different organizations coming at it from different perspectives, with different armories, different tools, and different technologies. So it isn't a one-size-fits-all. Now, I know many people in this room know that, but it's really important that we keep saying it. So with that said, I want to talk about the importance of a vision. And that is really crucial if we want to talk about this subject, because we all need to have the same understanding and the same direction. Where are we going? I had a teacher who said this once, and I'm sure he quoted it from a book, but it was basically said, if you don't know where you're going to end up somewhere else. So you need to have a clear vision of what you want to achieve. And then you need a mission of how you're going to get there. Now, we're all going to have different ones, but we do need to have commonality and shared purpose. Now, for InHope, it's quite straightforward. We have a vision of a digital world free of child sexual abuse material. That is our North Star. That is what we steer towards all of the time, and all of our activities we want towards that objective. Now, how do we do it? We do it through a mission. And again, it's quite simple for us. It's to support hotlines in the rapid removal of CSAM. And I'm going to come to that in a second. But really, I cannot overstate the importance. And as I mentioned in this, that I've been around a long time, and there's different messaging, different perspectives, but really we need a common vision. Now, why is that important? Because we're talking about, it was referenced by about victims earlier. We have to remember that we talk about CSAM, you're going to hear data. Like one of the speakers earlier mentioned, I think it was Ernie mentioned InHope data about the percentage of victims under the age of 13. Well, there are victims out there, and every time that content is viewed or shared, they are re-victimized. I met a victim approximately 4 weeks ago. who was a victim 34 years ago. She's a grown woman, a grown adult. Her content is still being shared, still being viewed, still being traded. So as she says, she has dealt with the abuse herself, but the actual recording of it still bothers her to this day. So it doesn't go, and bother is an understatement. So just to make that point, again, I know many people in this room know that, but I think we have to keep saying it, because if we don't, it gets lost in the data. Now, basically, sorry, I jumped a slide ahead for a second, because I have a slide for a reason. And it's because it was mentioned earlier, is that abuse only happens in the shadows. Okay, nobody abuses a child in the street or in front of other people. They only happen where they don't think they're going to get caught. Okay, so how do we stop that? Well, one, to use the line, we shine the light in the shadows, and that's a lovely big term. But what does that actually mean? Well, really what it means is about awareness. Okay, because that is the best weapon. Okay, because if you make people aware of the issue, and if you make potential victims, now obviously very small children can't be made aware, but in terms of once people through education programs in schools about what is acceptable behavior, what is not acceptable behavior. Now, I'm not an educator, but I can see it both as a parent and professionally, I can see the impact. If people know what's right and what's possible, so I'm going to say first priority is education, second priority is education, and third priority is education. And what form that takes has to be the right kind of environment. Obviously, it has to take in cultural and norms within each country, but it has not things, because child abusers and people who are in an abuse situation, which is nearly always in a familial scenario, it's a weaponization of shame, because the victim is afraid to say anything. And that's what perpetrators continuously do. And we all know that there are many situations that the time in which people report abuse, both on themselves, is really long, and normally into adulthood. So really, it's about the shame that people feel, and we have to take away that shame. How we do it, that's to be decided. But again, education is the first step. Now, we only come in, and I'm going to talk about hotlines, we come into it when something bad has happened. We only see something after somebody has been abused. So CSAM, as I said, is child sexual abuse material. So is a recording of the abuse of a child. Now, we as hotlines take reports from the public. We investigate that report, and if it's CSAM, we get it removed from the internet. We have 54 members in 50 countries, and as I mentioned, with everybody is on the same page in regard to our vision. So our primary objective is the rapid removal of child sexual abuse material. That's clear. But that starts at a public report, somebody seeing something, somebody telling. Then the clock starts. We need to get that down so that the content is removed from the internet as rapidly as possible. But we can't do it on our own, okay? First of all, the hotline does the first step, receives the report. The police and law enforcement have to be involved. We have a technology, which is ICCAM. I'm not going to bore you with the technical detail, but I will tell you that's an infrastructure that was paid for and funded by the European Commission. So they must be applauded for that. Prosecutors must be involved, industry must be involved, and if there was space, we'd also put in child welfare and organizations. But ultimately, we need to get it from left to right as fast as possible, because the longer that content is up, the more it can be reviewed, reused, reshared, and again, the victim is re-abused again and again and again. Now, again, what I will say to you is the hotline takes a report, we investigate it with cooperation, as you saw in the previous graph. The authorities are used. We think locally and then we act globally, because it's a global issue. It's not a national issue, but we have to have national nodes on the ground. Now, because Professor Kaff was there, I just took a screen grab of a reporting page. What does it look like? I would just encourage you, if you're not familiar with them, please go and look at the INHOP website or one of the other websites, our members, to show its commonality about taking reports. Again, I'm not going to bore you. But what I want to show you quickly is we receive reports, and I'm going to use this example as a hotline. Italy receives a report. If something happens in Italy, they have their relationship with industry, law enforcement, hopefully offenders prosecuted, victims rescued, content removed. But that generally doesn't happen individually in the country. It's trans-border. So we have the ICCAM system, which is based in Interpol. and that will identify the country of hosting and forward that report. And in this example, it's in Ireland, and they will repeat that same process. Equally, Interpol, they get the data as well, so that for victim identification purposes and general big data hash list creation. But equally important is statistics, which I was delighted that was quoted earlier on, because the numbers that we provide, that's where they come from. So what does that mean? Again, I'm not here to bother you with information, but just the key points. 88% of content that we saw in 2023 was content that had never been appearing on any hash list. So that means there's new victims that the police don't know about. So that's a key important factor, which was new to us. We didn't realize it ourselves. 95% are female. Okay, that may not seem like an important statistic to you, but it's growing. Boys are in the mix as well, and that's growing. 83% are less than 13 years of age, and I can tell you there's not that many 13-year-olds in it. It's towards lower below 9. And again, I'm not going to read those numbers out to you, but what I would encourage you to do is go to datadump.org. We have a data portal. You can pull whatever data you like or what you need to look at. And you decide what you see, and it's kind of self-intuitive. But to the point I wanted to get on to about legislation, and this is really important, and especially to reinforce the points that Emilia Puccio was saying. We are entering, oh wait a minute, I lost the slide, the era of regulation. Prior to this, we've had a situation where the self-regulatory approach pushing along, whether you disagree or agree with it, regulation is here or is coming in a bigger way. Some simple things. The Digital Services Act has requirements for trusted flagger status. That itself presents some challenges because of recognition. There's differences of opinion on interpretation of the criteria. Again, I hope that will be resolved in the near future, but it is ongoing. Currently, there are a very limited number of trusted flaggers within the European Union. As Emilia also mentioned, the EU CSAM regulation, he was much more polite about it than me. I say it's stalled and it's been blunted. I've spent a lot of time, myself and 2 of my colleagues in Brussels, advocating for the regulation. Now, while it wasn't perfect in its draft and we'd had things that we wanted amended, the fact that it's sitting in the long grass, I hope it gets moving, but my optimism is waning. I'll be in Brussels later in this week. Hopefully I'll learn some more. Again, I keep quoting Emilio, so apologies, Emilia. In terms of the recast of the CSAM directive, this, from our perspective, is a really positive thing because it will actually put hotlines and similar organizations into the articles of legislation, assuming that it makes it through the legislative process. That means that we will become legally we'll be on the pathway to legal recognition in member states, meaning that there will be a required presence or reporting platform within each country. Again, reference the Online Safety Bill in the UK and the Online Safety Act in Australia. Again, they have large powers and they are now in force. And I would also like, and I have specifically put this in, is that we now have across all the European Union national digital services coordinators. That means on the ground there will now be professional government authorities to actually act and implement legislation that is coming down from greater authorities, but it also means that relationships with industry and partnerships, it just should speed the whole thing up. I just hope it doesn't get stuck in bureaucracy, and I'm working with a lot of them to try and make sure that that doesn't happen.
Dr. Howard, I'm being
oh,
asked
you're
if
going
you
to
might
cut
be
me
able
off.
to
I know
wrap
I
it
ran
up.
off,
Yeah.
but I've been called doctor. So I'm going to run off and finish and just say, come back to my first point. Awareness and education is the most powerful tool we can do. And it's only by everybody working together can we achieve it. And with that, I want to thank you. And I'm going to stop talking and shut down my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Howard. Sorry to cut you off. We're just moving ahead because we have the next 3 are video links, and people might be looking to kind of continue on with their schedule. But thank you for that in-depth look at what it is to run a hotline and to seek to remove that CSAM material from the internet. Next, we have 3 perspectives from people from industry. The first is from Jacqueline Boucher, who is the Global Head of Platform Safety for Snapchat.
Thank you so much. I hope I'm going to be able to present to you. I'm not very good at doing this on the Zoom side, and it is looking a little bit dicey. So I hope that I can get some assistance from the ground crew there, because this is not working. I don't have an opportunity to present here.
I don't know if we
And
can
if you
give her
can't,
presenter permissions, perhaps?
it's not showing up that I have the opportunity to present the slide deck that I have. If I can't do it, it's not critical. I can just speak to it. Why don't we do that in the interest of time? Because I know there are other presenters and we are a little bit behind, as was said. So I thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today, and I thank Professor Caffo for the invitation. It is a pleasure. I want to talk to you specifically about the various dimensions of child sexual exploitation and abuse online that are relevant to all platforms and are experienced on all platforms. And then I'd like to talk to you specifically about SNAP's response and the proactive and reactive measures that we take. I want to shine a little bit of a spotlight on two aspects of the threat landscape, particularly AI-generated child sexual exploitation and abuse and sextortion. So when we're talking about the dimensions of child sexual exploitation and abuse, of course, we're talking about imagery, photos, videos, and now AI-generated imagery. We're talking about sexual attention, conversations, and solicitation of young people. The young people themselves sharing nudes and sexting. Child sex trafficking, sextortion is on the rise, both sexually motivated and financially motivated. And of course, unfortunately, grooming for sexual purposes. On some services, they also have the threats of live streaming of child sexual abuse. Thankfully, we don't offer such a feature and functionality on Snapchat. I would want you to know that Snap's response to all of this encompasses the very premise that we want to make Snapchat a hostile environment for any type of illegal or violating activity. We use proactive and reactive measures to fight back against child sexual exploitation and abuse on our service. And there are many dimensions to these measures. First off, we conduct industry-wide research. We release this on an annual basis on Safer Internet Day, but there are times throughout the year when we release featured pieces. For instance, on October 29th, we made some research available with respect to sextortion. And this is not just on Snapchat. This is on all platforms, all services, all devices in 6 countries, including some in the EU. Tomorrow, we are also making available some new material about and research about AI-generated findings. And this goes to some of the things that we were hearing from some of the earlier presenters, particularly around the illegality of this material. As we heard from Emilio Pucci, it's illegal just to have this material, to look at it. And this is not known amongst the general population. And that includes teenagers whom we surveyed, 13 to 17, young adults, ages 18 to 24, and parents of teenagers between the ages of 13 and 19. We need to make sure that people are aware of the illegality of even just possessing, looking at this type of material. In place at Snapchat, we have zero tolerance policies for all of the dimensions of child sexual exploitation and abuse. We're also leveraging different types of innovative approaches to detect this material. I very much appreciate Denton Howard's comments about the role of hotlines and helplines. They are essential, but we want to try to get to the right-hand side of Denton's continuum. We want to make sure that we're looking for this material, identifying it early, so we take it down before it becomes a report. So we're using technologies like PhotoDNA, like Google's CSAI match to find illegal videos, like Google's Content Safety API to find new, never before hashed imagery. That's where we really want to be, early in the process, before it comes to an actual report. Also at Snap, we're employing what we would call behavioral signals to detect bad actors and violating content. So when it comes to the actual in-app warnings and tools that we provide, if young people, for instance, have few mutual friends in common and they've made a new request, they've been asked to be friends with someone, we flag that to them. If other people that are trying to be friends with young people have been blocked by others, we're going to flag that for young people. If they're also being asked to be friends with someone in a distant geography where things like sextortion are known to permeate, we're also going to flag that for young people. We have tools for reporting, blocking, and removing friends and bad actors and content. And we also offer parents and caregivers and trusted adults like clergy members, counselors, other teachers and educators, the ability to report content and report accounts and work with young people so that they have their back on the service. We also work cross-industry. We work cross-sector with hotlines, with helplines, with NGOs, with academics and researchers. We have our own safety advisory board that's made up of 19 individuals, some specializing in child sexual exploitation and abuse. And this year we added a teen council. It's a pilot program in the US where we're asking young people themselves what they're doing online, what they're experiencing, and how we can make those experiences safer and healthier. We, of course, support law enforcement in their investigations. And as Denton said, I grew up at Microsoft. Before I joined Snap, I was at Microsoft for 22 years, and I grew up on awareness raising and education about these types of issues. There's so much that could be prevented if people were just aware, and that goes for teens and young people and young adults and educators and parents and everyone across all sectors. So if I were going to shine a little bit of a spotlight on two of these areas, particularly sextortion and AI-generated child sexual exploitation and abuse, I think we've all heard the stories that have been percolating the world over for the last couple of years now. And when it comes to sextortion and fighting it on Snapchat, I want you to know that we've been pushing back against this type of abuse for the better part of 2 years now. And one of the first things that we did was we put in place a targeted reporting reason for financial sextortion. We don't want young people to have to scroll through and say, oh yes, I want to report financial sextortion. That's not something that's really relatable to them. And as we know, in so many of the dimensions of child sexual exploitation and abuse, young people oftentimes don't even realize that they are being abused. But if someone is asking them or asking them for nudes and threatening to share those nudes unless some types of demands are met, that is something that young people can relate to. So our targeted reporting reason is they leaked / are threatening to leak my nudes. And we've been given counsel from others externally that that would be an appropriate way of describing it. I talked a little bit about our behavioral signals. We have in place for sextortion a signal-based enforcement policy. So if an account is demonstrating certain characteristics, it is locked for sextortion. We're repeatedly analyzing trends and patterns and techniques of bad actors. We're doing this cross-platform research, as I said, and we just released some new data on October the 29th. We participate in NECMEC's program called Take It Down, which a young person, if they have nudes out there and they're afraid of this content being circulated, and our research shows that so many young people who thought they were sharing with one individual, that information, that content, those images got away from them and they weren't able to control it. So NECMEC's Take It Down program offers the ability for those young people to hash their images on site, on their own device, and then NECMEC makes those hashes available to companies like Snapchat so we can see if duplicative material is circulating on our services. We participate in a similar program out of the UK from the Southwest Grid for Learning for 18 plus as well. We're always seeking advice and guidance from experts. And as I talked about the warning messages, we're also raising awareness in-app about financial sextortion, the consequences of sharing nudes and sexting. And we're asking experts like NECMEC, like Thorn, like the IWF in the UK and others for their feedback on these resources and tools that we've created to make sure that they are maximizing effectiveness and resonance with young people. In terms of AI-generated child sexual abuse, we at SNAP have to be extra vigilant and diligent when it comes to this material because we operate an AI conversational chatbot called My AI. So we have to guard against attempted generation, and we have to guard against the resharing and distribution that may have been of this type of imagery that may have been created on some other platform. But I want you to know that when it comes to suspected synthetic imagery, we treat that like authentic illegal child sexual exploitation and abuse material. So we are actioning it at the content level, at the account level, sometimes the device level, and we are reporting to the National Center. We're participating in dialogues and conferences about this because there's no technology yet in place to detect this type of material. We're going on tells in the imagery itself. For instance, if a child had 6 digits or was in a very contorted, unnatural pose, that would be indicia of AI-generated child sexual exploitation and abuse imagery. We're conducting research here. As I said, we're going to release some new data tomorrow about these very instances. Also, Take It Down is very relevant here. Stop NCII for 18 plus, very relevant here. Again, these young people and others can hash this imagery, make it available to these services, and then those services make those hashes available to us so that we can track down and remove, as Denton so graciously and carefully advocates for, taking down that content. Always, again, seeking advice and guidance from experts and making in-app awareness raising and educational resources available. Last September, in September of 2023, we made 4 new short-form videos available in-app for young people on the consequences of sexting and sending nudes, on financial sextortion, on child sex trafficking, and on grooming. My last slide here is just really some things to keep in mind. We've heard some tremendous comments from so many experts this evening, and I just want to emphasize a few and maybe share a couple of my own as well. We need to keep in mind.
If you don't mind, if you're able to kind of wrap up for us, we'd appreciate it. We have to move on.
Yes, that's what I'm doing with this slide. That's what I'm doing. These are whole of society issues, and everyone plays a role in fighting back. When it comes to silver bullets, we need to keep in mind that there are none, technological or otherwise. There is no space online or elsewhere that can truly be designated as safe. This is about child online safety, digital safety, whatever you call it. It's about risk mitigation and risk management at the end of the day. That's why, to echo Denton again, awareness raising and education are so vital. And thoughtful regulation is welcome, but we can't have knee-jerk regulation or regulation that just responds to some particular issue. We need to have thoughtful, considered regulation that is really going to make a difference. And just my final point is we're all in this together. And there are responsible platforms out there doing the right thing, many of them on the call today. Thank you so much, and I appreciate the time.
Thanks so much for your insight. Sorry to rush you along. We're just falling a little bit behind schedule. I'm wondering if maybe we can come back to the video we'll be playing and go straight to David Miles, who I think is with us and is the Director of Safety Policy for Europe, Middle East, and Africa for Meta.
Technology-wise, I've sort of been defeated at this end, so do bear with me. Firstly, can I thank Professor Caffo and Telefono Azzurro's team for the invitation to speak today. In this presentation, I've been asked to share Meta's approach to age verification and the technology tools we have developed to protect children on our family of apps, which include Instagram and Facebook. We take a multi-layered approach to youth in terms of understanding age, parental supervision, safeguarding tools, and at the heart of this is co-design and consultation with youth. Over the last 4 years, we've launched more than 50 safety, privacy, and wellbeing features, and they've taught us a lot about what concerns teens and what they find most effective. On September the 17th, in the UK, US, Canada, and Australia, we launched Instagram teen accounts. As we speak, tens of millions of young people are being enrolled in this new experience. Early in the new year, we will bring teen accounts to Italy and the rest of the EU, first on Instagram and then on Facebook. So what are teen accounts? Teen accounts are a new experience for teens guided by parents. Teen accounts have built-in protections which limit who can contact them and the content they see, and also provide more ways to safely connect with friends and explore their interests. Our research in close consultation with academics, parents, teens, and other stakeholders continue to inform how we build safe, age-appropriate experiences for young people. And what emerged was that unwanted contact was the top concern, followed by unwanted content and screen time amongst parents and young people. And that's why Instagram has launched teen accounts. So this will limit who can contact teens and the content they see. Teens under 16 won't be able to change any of these settings to be less strict without getting the parents' consent. In other words, even those in public accounts will be defaulted into private accounts until the parent decides to change that. That is a radical change in the way Instagram works. We're committed to ensuring that teens have safer, more private and age-appropriate experiences when they use our services. Let's talk a little bit now about understanding age. We do a lot to understand people's age and take a continuous, again, multi-layered approach to refine the accuracy of user age through their online journey. The reality is that no single method will work 100% of the time and for every user. So rather than relying on a single step process, we believe it's more effective to build a suite of tools. And these include age collection at sign up, community reporting, building AI to detect age estimation, and educating users. However, we are committed to driving innovation on this front and attacking this issue from multiple angles. Understanding age is complex and an industry-wide challenge that requires thoughtful solutions to appropriately balance privacy, effectiveness, and fairness. While we have built a robust approach to age assurance, we believe the most effective way is to implement age assurance at App Store or operating system level. It's easier for parents, more privacy protective, and the capability already exists. In the US, the average teenager uses more than 44 apps on their phones, and in Europe, it's even higher. We believe that a significant step forward could be taken at a European level to ensure that parents only need to verify the age of their child once. Thereafter, their child can be placed into age-appropriate experiences on every single app. I hope you found that useful, and thank you for the opportunity to share Meta's approach to age assurance and some of the top technologies we use to protect children.
Thank you very much. I think we have one more video presentation. It's a recorded video from Liz Thomas, who is the Director of Public Policy and Digital Safety for Microsoft.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to address this eminent gathering. Thank you also to Telefono Azzurro and the Italian Embassy for bringing this important event together to mark the International Day for the Protection of Children Against Sexual Abuse and Exploitation. My name is Liz Thomas, and I represent Microsoft as a Director of Public Policy for Digital Safety. Days and events like this are critical to ensure that we do not lose sight of the ongoing urgency of this mission and to centre the voices of the young people affected by this harm. This harm is not only a grave violation of the rights of the children impacted, but also a profound societal challenge that continues to demand our collective action. At Microsoft, we have a long-standing commitment to combating child sexual exploitation and abuse online, and we know we have a role to play in that collective action. Our approach is multifaceted, focusing on advancing policies, building partnerships, and developing innovative technologies to help protect vulnerable children. First and foremost, we have established strict policies that prohibit the use of our services for any form of child sexual exploitation and abuse, including grooming and trafficking. We enforce these policies rigorously, reporting any violations to the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children. The Centre continues to play a vital role as a global clearinghouse, helping to bring perpetrators to justice. The National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children and others in the international network of hotlines led by InHope, including Telefono Azzurro, play a vital role in the child safety ecosystem. Partnerships of this kind are critical to address the harm. At Microsoft, we collaborate with governments, non-government organizations, and our industry peers to help advance online safety. Organizations like the Internet Watch Foundation, the Tech Coalition, and the We Protect Global Alliance are vital allies in the collective mission. These partnerships enable us to leverage collective expertise and resources to help combat this abhorrent crime more effectively. Central to that approach is the importance of centering survivors. We recognize that the voices and experiences of survivors must guide all of our efforts across each sector. That means not only for governments to provide support and recovery services, but for all of us, also ensuring that our interventions do not inadvertently cause further harm. Effective victim recovery services are essential, and as Microsoft, we advocate for laws that protect victims while holding perpetrators accountable. And we have been advocating globally to ensure that laws are modernized to reflect the emergence of AI technologies, and that those laws can continue to protect children. But we know that policies and partnerships alone are not enough. We must innovate through technology. Microsoft has been at the forefront of developing tools like PhotoDNA, which helps identify and remove images of child exploitation. But most importantly, looking ahead, the potential of generative AI offers both opportunities and challenges in our fight against child sexual exploitation and abuse online. While AI can be misused to create harmful content, it also holds immense promise for enhancing our detection and prevention capabilities and our ability to address risk. We are still early in this journey, but we are optimistic that AI holds the promise of enhancing child protection measures. AI's potential to benefit humanity has, of course, been recognised in the Rome Call for Artificial Intelligence Ethics. The Rome Call is an important commitment to help ensure that AI helps advance the well-being of individuals, communities, and humanity, and to ensure that AI is used responsibly. We must bring these ethical principles to AI in a practical way while avoiding harm. Microsoft has been a proud signatory to the Rome Call, including being actively involved in expanding its reach and impact. And at Microsoft, we are committed to responsible AI practices. This includes developing robust safety architecture, implementing content provenance, and continuously improving our approach to address new threats as they emerge. That includes the threat of child sexual exploitation and abuse, as well as other forms of image-based abuse. We continue to take steps to address the risks that our AI services are misused to perpetrate these harms. And we're proud to support the Safety by Design principles developed by Thorne and All Tech is Human, which will help drive the development of best practices. All up, we know this requires a comprehensive, collaborative, and survivor-centered approach. Thank you to the young people who are willing to give their voices and to share their experiences. Together, we can make a significant impact in creating a safer digital world for everyone and leveraging technology for good. Thank you again for the opportunity to contribute to this important discussion. And Microsoft looks forward to continuing to collaborate to advance ethical AI for the benefit of humanity.
We're going to shift now from an online presentation to one in the room with us, and we're going to shift from industry back toward the space of clergy abuse in the Catholic Church. We're joined now by Gemma Hickey, who is a leader in Ending Clergy Abuse, an international group of survivors and survivor advocates who are in Rome in these days.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I came to this event with the invitation of Father Zollner. And as you can see, I am not Father Zollner. And I just got a last-minute invite. He said, "You should go. I can't go, and you're a survivor. You need to talk." So I said, "Okay, who's going? What's happening? What should I wear?" I didn't bring a suit with me. And he said, "Well, you know, I wear the same thing every time. I'm a Jesuit, and I'm a priest. And so it's okay, whatever. Wear your sports jacket." I said, "Okay, thank you. Thank you, Father." So I did prepare something a little different than what's been presented online, but I'm a writer. And so I will pull this up and begin. And the theme is give voice to silence. And so that means sometimes having difficult conversations. It means talking about things that we don't really like to talk about. And so I challenge you here to open your minds And if you can't do that, then please open your hearts to what I have to say. Ambassador, Professor, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, new friends, buongiorno. Did I say it correctly? Firstly, Professor, to call you a champion, a term often used by Father Zollner to describe your work for children's rights, could not be more fitting. As someone who's had the privilege of founding organizations in Canada, I understand deeply the dedication and effort required to build something from the ground up. As a survivor, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude for your unwavering commitment to helping people like myself. Your national helpline for the prevention of child abuse has changed countless lives, providing a lifeline when needed most. As a Canadian, it's an honor to stand before you today at this notable venue. The Italian Embassy to the Holy See serves as a unique diplomatic bridge, given the Vatican's role as an independent sovereign entity and its significant religious and political influence on the world stage. Italy, with its remarkable legacy, spanning from the masterpieces of the Renaissance to its culinary technological innovations, resonates deeply with Canada. The influence of Italian immigration has shaped the fabric of our society, from our art and politics to food and communities. Our two countries share strong diplomatic and economic ties, united by a common commitment to human rights, sustainability, and multiculturalism. Yet, alongside these shared achievements, we must also confront a darker history, one of harm and injustice that we must acknowledge and address together. Rome, like much of Italy, is known for its breathtaking art, its ancient structures, yet at the heart of this storied city lies the Vatican, cue the bells. The seat, the Pope, the epicenter of Catholicism, but beneath the grandeur and the history, there lies a truth, one that cannot be hidden behind the walls of the church or the weight of its legacy. Each time I come to Italy, I imagine what it might be like to experience this incredible country as a tourist, immersed in its beauty, its culture, its charm. But when I arrive, I do so with a heavy heart and a profound sense of responsibility. I am not here today as a mere visitor, but rather as a survivor, not only of clergy abuse, but of the silence that has allowed that abuse to continue for far too long. The silence of those who knew, the silence of those who should have spoken out, the silence that told me, your pain doesn't matter. For years, I lived with shame, with confusion, with isolation. I found the courage to speak out, and for a short time, the priest who abused me was removed. But the cycle did not end. He was returned to a parish just a stone's throw from my home, and the trauma continued. The abuse itself may have stopped, but the indifference of those who failed to protect me only deepened the wound. This story is not mine alone. It is a story echoed across the globe in cities and towns, in homes and orphanages, in schools and churches. Clergy sexual abuse is not a relic of the past. It is an ongoing, ever-present reality. While countries around the world have begun to act, investigating, issuing reports, and despite countless exposés in media and ongoing legal battles led by brave survivors, the church, from a survivor's perspective, seems to lag. New reports of abuse by clergy continue to emerge, but for every case that is brought to light, countless others remain hidden in the shadows. My home province of Newfoundland and Labrador, like all of Canada, carries the deep wound of clergy abuse. The suffering of boys and girls at Belvedere and Mount Cashel orphanages, and the abuse in Labrador's residential schools was concealed, hidden by the very institution meant to protect them. The cycle of harm continues to haunt generations. Its damage far-reaching. Alongside these institutional horrors, countless cases of abuse by priests were covered up, with abusers reassigned, forcing the suffering to fester like an untreated wound, with no time to heal. Survivors have fought for justice, but dioceses have used bankruptcy to shift the burden of the sins onto the parishioners. We've all endured suffering as a result, including good priests and nuns and brothers. Good priests. As a result, while our abusers continue to serve without consequence, as many remain on the altar, survivors are left to endure a life sentence, confined to a prison of memory. The church embodies a painful duality. On one hand, it represents a sanctuary, a place where children are protected, where faith uplifts. On the other, it has become a graveyard of deep violation, where the sanctity of human dignity was shattered beneath the guise of religious authority. This contradiction is the lived reality for many survivors. We are left to reconcile the sacred and the profane in our own lives. For those who have suffered within this institution, healing is not just about confronting the trauma. It is about dismantling the false sense of security and reverence that the church once symbolized. And yet, in the shadow of the Vatican, an institution that refuses to acknowledge not only my abuse, but my very identity, I feel a surge of untapped strength. Walking through the streets of this ancient city is like stepping into a living library where the stories of empires past and the echoes of masterful artistry reveal the profound depth of human civilization. Cities built upon cities, each rising from the remnants of what came before. I am struck by our inherent ability to rebuild, to reimagine ourselves, no matter the destruction we've endured. Just as Christ rose again, just as the streets of Rome have risen from ruins, so too can we begin anew. As a transgender, non-binary survivor of clergy abuse, I didn't just reclaim my mind, I reclaimed my body, battered and violated, but far from broken. In doing so, I become the architect of my own design. We are not defined by the past, we are the builders of what comes next. Having undergone profound personal transformation and played a role in changing laws in Canada, I know that real change is possible. Earlier today, I had the privilege of speaking at a joint press conference as president of Ending Clergy Abuse, a global coalition of survivors and human rights activists from over 25 countries. Sitting beside me was Father Zollner, and together with our colleagues from both sides, we launched a zero-tolerance law aimed at amending canon law to end clergy abuse. A big goal. The proposal is a small but meaningful step forward, albeit symbolic at this point. But as the saying goes, Rome wasn't built in a day. And like the ruins buried beneath the city, the church must be rebuilt, not from stone or marble, but from the rubble of silence, denial, and abuse. I identify as non-binary, which means I embrace all parts of who I am, the girl who was abused, and the man I am becoming. To be non-binary is to live outside the confines of traditional gender roles. And in doing so, I've come to see the world in a way that challenges the boundaries others might place on identity, pain, and healing. This lens allows me to view my experience not as a simple story of victimhood, but as a complex journey that involves both the suffering I've endured and the resilience I've discovered in myself. Looking at my past, I see the abuse I suffered, but I also see the larger context in which it occurred. When I reflect on the priest who harmed me, I no longer see him simply as an abuser. I see him as a product of the same system that harmed me, a victim, too, of the institution we were both raised in. The church, with its power structures, hierarchies, and deep-rooted dogmas, shaped both of our lives in ways that I can now better understand. In recognizing this, I don't deny my pain, nor do I minimize the damage done, but I have learned to acknowledge the system that shaped both the abuser and the abused is key in breaking this cycle of harm. It is this broader understanding, this ability to see the humanity in all of us, that has helped me break the silence and continue the work advocating for survivors. True healing and restoration can only begin when we confront the destruction of the past and rise from the ashes, stronger, better, and unafraid to face the truth. That's how I feel when I look in the mirror now. And after hearing everyone tonight, that's how I feel when I look around the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Gemma, for that important testimony, really moving. Dr. Capo, did you want to offer some concluding remarks?
Only a few words, because I think it's very important to listen to the victims. As we work from 30 years to listen to children victims of sexual abuse and abuse in different forms. And this is the reason we convene with the support of the ambassador this meeting, because we try to find a solution. And in many speeches, we had very inspiring ideas about the future. I think we have to work together, and the victim have to be at the center of our action. As a member of the Political Commission, we know that the victims are crucial, and also I read that now we know from each other from many years. Now he's the Secretary of the Commission. We try to be more and more active in this area, as Hans Zollner, that you know, and others, colleagues. I think we have to listen to understand better what we can do. And this happens either in the offline life, either in the online world. And I think it is the occasion today to listen. The Italian church decided to have in every church today a moment of prayer. People will meet together and to discuss about, to think about the suffering situation. But I think we have to do more in a concrete way. We need a change of legislation. We have to work at national, European, and international level. It is what we have to do. And I'd like to thank all the speakers and all the participants to this very important event, and in particular the ambassador that hosted us in this important day. Thank you.
I think that's the end of the program. Thank you all. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for having us. Thank you, Telefono Azzurro. Thank you for all the staff that were organizing all of this and making sure that we had video connections and audio. So thank you very much.